Well, kicking things off today with the new fall season comes definitely weather changes. And for many, that means an allergy season and trips to the doctor. Well, what about the ones who administer the medicine, like vaccinations? Should they be required to get vaccinations themselves? Our attorney and legal correspondent, David Lesch, joins us to continue his constitutional law series. And good to see you.
Nice to see you. It's been too long.
It's been too long, I know. But we're back in the saddle.
We're back, and we're going to be in the next couple of weeks, maybe a few months. We're going to talk about some constitutional law issues. I felt today's topic was timely, given the fact that many people are going to start thinking about flu shots, and the issue always comes up every year. Should the healthcare workers in New York City be forced to have a vaccination for the flu shot? And this is controversial. Very controversial. Anytime you're forcing somebody or attempting to force somebody to do something to their bodies, you can have a constitutional issue. Remember, whenever we're dealing with constitutional law, it's a balancing. It's always a balancing of the individual's rights against the rights of society as a whole. And that's really the crux of constitutional law. Well, in this particular instance, you're talking about balancing the rights of the healthcare worker against the rights of society as a whole. Healthcare worker to not have somebody do something evasive or invasive to their body, against a society who wants to protect themselves from a flu outbreak, right? Mm-hmm. So that's really what you're talking about here. New York attempted a few years ago to be the first state to mandate that healthcare workers be vaccinated, and it was struck down. But this always comes up every year. Other states deal with it by allowing workers the opportunity to be vaccinated, not charging them, giving them time off if they're sick so that they can recover, doing everything they can to make sure that the health of the healthcare worker is first and foremost, so that they don't come in and then spread the flu or whatever germs that they have to the people they're taking care of. But the question becomes, do we as a society have the right to force people who are dealing with the public to have some type of vaccination? What you're running into is the Fourth Amendment, the right against search and seizure. And the issue that we always end up having with constitutional law is private entities against public entities. How do we get to the part of search and seizure when you're talking about something like vaccination? Because you're searching somebody's body, seizing somebody's body. That's really the right against unreasonable searches and seizures is the right against somebody else to seize your body, to search your body, to force you to do something to your body. That's the constitutional protection of one of the Ten Amendments. It's the hallmark of the Bill of Rights. It's one of the things that was put forth by the founders. And that's usually what's cited when somebody says, no, you can't force me to have a test or force me to have vaccinated. It's an unreasonable search and seizure. It's as if you're frisking me. Right. It's the same type of thing. Well, we then say, hold on a second, let's go through some of the statistics here. 2,000 people a year die in New York as a result of the flu. Right? It is true, and some of the statistics I have, is that healthcare workers, 42% of them do get vaccinated, which is higher than the 33% of the general community that gets the flu shot. But the 42% is not as high as the elderly, who between 65 and 70% of get the flu shot. So you would think the healthcare workers would be as high as the elderly, right? Percentage-wise, but they're not. So percentage-wise, really, the public isn't really taking full advantage of these flu shots. Well, that's correct. And what it really comes down to is this: that there's a side that is against flu shots, and the side that is for flu shots. Well, what is the arguments against the flu shot? You can't imagine there would be any, but there are. Mm-hmm. First of all, the argument is, well, it doesn't really work. It only works for 70% at most. 30% who get it never works anyway. To that, other people say, well, hold on a second, 70% is pretty good. And for the 30%, a lot of times if they had it the year before, that may end up working against this strain of flu shot. The second argument is, well, it mutates. So even if you get the flu shot, there's a good chance that, again it's not going to work. And why are we wasting our time with this when it could be bringing on other colds that you may have? Well, that's not true, because what they're putting into your body is a dead virus. It's not causing the flu. It's not causing a cold. It's a complete misconception. Mm-hmm. Another argument is, well, it has thimerosal in it. This has been linked to autism, but there's never really been any study that has ever shown that thimerosal actually causes autism. Fourth argument as well, I'm pregnant and it could hurt the baby or my unborn baby. Well, again, it's never been proven that it does or it doesn't. So this is an issue.
So now, for those who that's the against argument.
The pro is look, if more people get vaccinated, there's less of a chance of there being any type of spreading of this contagious condition. And if we could get more and more people to do this, then those with chronic illnesses who are more susceptible, now you and I may not be as susceptible as those people who are in nursing homes or those people who are in hospitals, we make sure that they are protected. And you as a healthcare worker, have an obligation if you're dealing with these people all the time. And here's the issue. The argument is for 48 hours before having the flu, you don't even know that you have the flu and you're contagious. So it's not fair to the people you're working on if for 48 hours before you don't even know you have the flu and yet you're giving it to somebody that you're working with.
So the issue goes to court. We're in court. Where do things stand now?
So what New York State tries to do is institute legislation to force the vaccinations on healthcare workers. We're talking about the public sector right now. With respect to the private hospitals, well, a private hospital can always ask their workers to do it. It could be part of the employment. And that's the thing with constitutional law. It usually doesn't affect the private industry as much as it affects the public sector. Privately, the courts say, hey, you can do what you want. You want to hire somebody and they want to work for you and you want to put on certain limits. If you're not violating a lot of the constitutional rights, the protections that they have, we don't see a problem with that. And we're thinking if somebody comes to work for you voluntarily, yes, you can say, you want to work for me? Well, then you have to get a flu shot. We don't seem to have a problem with that. But when you're talking about the public hospitals and public employees, and you're asking a public employee to come in and have to have a mandatory flu shot, we have a problem with that. And we're not going to mandate that now. We will say we will not, the federal government might say, we won't accredit you as a hospital if you don't at least provide flu shots. Or we'll do other things to squeeze you, which is what the federal government does to force you to comply with constitutional issues. But we cannot, as a court system, mandate that we cannot allow you to force somebody else to get vaccinated. So it's a very sticky issue. It comes up every single year. And remember, anytime I'm going to be doing these series on constitutional law, different topics, there is never going to be a clear-cut answer. Right. That's the point of constitutional law. It's always a debate.
So this will be something that will be debated for some time.
It's always going to be debated, and that's the interesting part of the constitutional law series, is you never really come out with an answer. You're always going to be debating back and forth. Now, there may be more rules and regulations that come in. New York may say, look, you have to give more sick time. Or you have to allow employees to be able to take more time off to get their flu shots. There'll be inroads, but there will not be any clear-cut legislation.
So we're not going to see any final answer.
No, there will not. New York will attempt,
right,
the way they did with the seatbelts, to keep pushing and pushing it until finally it gets past the court system, and the court system would say you can mandate that people wear seatbelts. For a long time, we as a society said, don't tell me I have to wear a seatbelt.
Right.
And it's a constitutional issue. You can't force me to do something to my body that I don't want to do. I don't want to be restrained. You're restraining me. Well, finally, the state made a good point and said, hey, you don't wear seatbelts, you get into an accident, we pay for it as a society. We pay Medicare and Medicaid, and therefore it's coming out of our pockets. So if we're paying for this, you're going to have to wear your seatbelts. Finally, the court system said, we agree with that argument. Your constitutional law protections weigh less than the state's balancing of having to pay for all the medical care. That may happen here. At some point, the state might say, hey, we're paying for all the people who are getting the flu. And we're, hospital stays, and it's affecting other industries. And if we're paying for it, Medicare and Medicaid, then yes, we're going to ask you to get to a flu shot, and then now we're not going to ask. We're going to say, you want to work for us in the public hospitals, you have to get one. And then the court system might say, you know what, they have a point. They have statistics to show that the flu is costing our state an extra $25, $50 million in medical care a year. Therefore, we are going to make it mandatory. So, yeah, there is no answer now. But the more statistics that come out that show that it's costing our state millions of dollars, then maybe the legislation might finally get through. And you know what, the way it always is with legislation.
And it's 3 big words: to be continued.
To be continued.
All righty. What do you have coming up on today's verdict?
On today's verdict, we've been handling. We ended up doing a lot of workers' compensation issues. I thought that was very interesting. Great last show on sexual harassment in public places. Men and women who rub up against other people in the subways and on the streets, improper touching, what you can do to prevent this from happening, groups that are coming to your defense. That was last show. And we're going to have a couple of issues come in. We have the president of the New York State Trial Lawyers coming on in a couple of weeks, talking about the agenda of the trial lawyers. So got a lot of good things coming up in the next month, 2 months on today's verdict.
Good to be back with you, David Lesch.
Nice to see you.
All righty.